Welcome to the NLP Talks podcast, bringing you inspirational stories along with a good dose of potentially life-changing NLP strategies. I'm Laura Evans, multi-award-winning NLP trainer, and I'm on a mission to help you unleash your potential in business and life. I'm so glad you're here. Pull up a chair, listen in, and let's get started on revealing more about this transformational NLP toolkit. Hi there, my name is Laura Evans and welcome to another episode of the NLP Talks podcast. Now today is a slightly different episode because you have got me all to yourself. I'm currently sat in my office at home with a clementine and clove candle burning, hot water with fresh lemon, my salt lamp going, and I'm surrounded by stats because today we are going to be talking about burnout. Now, whether you're interested in burnout, whether you are currently burning out, or whether you are currently burnt out, or you're looking to help someone that is, I think you're going to find this episode really helpful. I'm going to be talking about burnout from a personal perspective, how I experienced it. And I'm going to share with you some mindset hints and tips in order to help you personally or to help your friends and family if that is what you want to do. Now, I must caveat this episode with I am not medically trained, and please don't take anything that I say in this episode as medical advice because that's not what I'm about. I'm here to help you from a mindset point of view, share some personal experience, some hints and tips to help you on your journey with burnout and to help you help other people from a layman's point of view. Now, before we get into the main episode, you may already know, but if you don't, here's the news, that there is a free ebook that goes with this episode. It's called the Burnout Field Guide. It's about 20 pages, and in the ebook, I've created a whole host of exercises to help you do some self-analysis, to make some decisions, and then take some action. So wherever you're listening to this podcast episode, check the description below because there will be a link for you to go and download it. Now, you don't have to have the field book in front of you to listen to the episode. We can crack on, but you can also go and download it and have it in front of you as we go if you wish. The choice is, as always, entirely down to you. You can listen to this episode as many times as you like until you've got all the value out of it that you need. So without further ado, I'm going to have a sip of my hot water and lemon. It'll be clear why I've got this in a moment. Let's get started by looking at what is burnout. Now, burnout is set to be probably the number one well-being topic and issue in 2021, not just for organizations, but for all of us as individuals who are coming out of the pandemic and starting to get back to normal life. But my experience of burnout happened many years ago, and I hit what I call the brick wall. And that's because I, inverted commas, fell asleep at the wheel. I was not paying attention to what was going on in my body and in my thinking and in my mindset. And I want to raise these flags with you in this episode today. Now, before we get into all of that, let's just stop to have a look at, what exactly is burnout and, why is it such a big deal? Well, with the stresses and strains of working through the global pandemic, a lot of us have been forced to juggle more than we ever have done in the past, experiencing potentially mental and emotional overload as we've worked from home. We've had to deal with business challenges, some people dealing with parenting at home and having the kids home whilst working. I mean, the list goes on. You don't need me to tell you, right? And this has seen the rapid rise in people struggling with their ability to bounce back and their energy levels. Now, so much so that the World Health Organization has actually identified employee burnout as an issue. Now, of course, burnout doesn't just affect us as employees and business people, but the World Health Organization has recognized burnout as an occupational phenomenon. Now, in the 11th revision of the International Classification of Diseases, easy for me to say, the handbook describes burnout as a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. Now, for me, it's not just about work. Actually, I think there's a lot of life factors that can play a role, but I'm not denying that work is for many people a massive contributor, and it certainly was for me. Now, there are many definitions of burnout if you go and Google it. One definition that I found here is that burnout is a state of emotional and physical exhaustion that is brought upon by long periods of constant, unrelating stress, and it renders you feeling depleted and dejected. Now, that's certainly how I would have described it when I had it. But burnout's not a new thing. I mean, if we go all the way back to Herbert Freudenberger, I hope I got his name right, a psychologist back in the 1970s, he was the first person, I think, on record to actually discuss work-related burnout because of unresolved job stress. Now, he was doing a lot of research at the time, but actually was using his research as almost as an experiment in themselves. And his research that was published in a psychology-related journal talked about his observations of himself and his staff while they were doing some clinical drug trials, I believe, if I'm right. And he characterized burnout as a set of symptoms that include exhaustion resulting from work's excessive demands, as well as resulting physical symptoms. Now, symptoms like headaches and sleeplessness. I mean, I can, totally relate to headaches. Now, sleep's an interesting one. We're going to come back to sleep because sleep's not something I personally ever struggled with, but many people do that suffer with burnout. They talked about the quickness to anger. I mean, I certainly found when I'm burnt out and I'm frazzled, my temper, can rear its head, but I'm certainly not as calm as I normally would. And in this experiment, he talked about the fact that people tended to be closed thinking, as in they weren't open to new and different ways. They just seemed to work harder and harder and harder. He noticed that burnt out workers, as he said it, looks, acts and seems depressed. But to me, they're potentially different things. And again, I'm not medically trained, so I'm not going to go into the medical definition. But I just want to make the point that this burnout is not new. And it's something that I think actually, if there's a plus to come out of this pandemic, what it's done is made many of us way more aware of this thing called burnout. Now, I want to take you through some stats that I found. Again, I'm surrounded by paper here in the office. Let me have a quick swig of my hot water and fresh lemon. Because I think it's fascinating when you start to look at, the data, like what does the data tell us about this phenomenon? So here's a survey that was done of 1,500 US workers by the job site Indeed.com in January 2020, so pre the pandemic. And they were talking even at that point that burnout was on the rise, with over half of the respondents, 52%, saying that they'd experienced burnout in 2021. Now, that was up from 43% who said the same in the survey pre-COVID. So pre-COVID, 43%, during and just after the pandemic, 52%. So it's on the up. I mean, I don't think we need a stat to tell us that, right? 67% of the responders, the majority of the responders said that burnout was worsening during the pandemic. So that was one survey from Indeed. Let me just check my notes here. Indeed, studies showed that those who work from home are more likely to say burnout has worsened. And I think that's interesting, isn't it? Because I think the lines between work and home life blurred while we were all working so much from home. And I think, one of the things that strikes me about burnout is the word boundaries. And I think when I got burnt out, I didn't have good boundaries. I didn't make time for myself. There's that old saying, isn't it? If you don't make time for your wellness, you will ultimately make time for your illness, and I think that's exactly what happened to me. I didn't take care of myself at all. I just worked and worked and worked, and there was no balance. So I think boundaries is a key word we're going to come back to later in the episode. But they also talked in their survey about people's inability to disconnect from the office because those boundaries had become so blurred. Now, another survey that I've got here was a survey by Robert Half. And in December, I think it was last year, 2020, I believe, they did another survey, again in the US, of 1,136 employed people. And they found a staggering 76% of employees were experiencing work burnout, with researchers saying that symptoms included things like exhaustion, feeling negative, cynical, or detached from work, and reduced performance. Now, another survey by a company called Limeade, don't know who they are, but it was their survey, again found that before the pandemic, 42% of workers were saying they were burnt out. And actually, a few months later into the pandemic, so a few months into the pandemic, this had shot up to 72%. The list goes on and on and on. I could quote stats at you all day. Now, what's interesting is, what people have done about it. Organizations are really grappling with how do they help people with this phenomenon, because it's not going to go away. And I've seen lots of stuff on LinkedIn recently where, people are saying organizations need to take responsibility. Organizations need to look at their workplace culture. And yes, in part, I think that's the answer. But I also think there is an element of personal responsibility. Now, I'm very much looking at myself in the mirror, metaphorically, of course, as I say that, because, when I think about the excessive hours I used to work, the lack of boundaries that I had, the lack of self-care, as some might call it, I had to take some personal responsibility for what was going on in my life at that time. My boss even said to me, I remember distinctly at the time, just before I did finally burnt out and have my mental health breakdown. And by the way, I see them as very different. I know a lot of people merge those two together. I do see them as different. I think you can be burnt out without having a breakdown, and you can have a breakdown without being burnt out, just to be clear on my view on that. But she said to me, Laura, you need to back off. You need to look at how you can better organize yourself. You need to look at, for example, don't drive everywhere and spend 4 hours a day driving from one place to another for your meetings. Could you do some of them online? Could you do conference calls? Could you, do more from home on the phone? And I didn't want to. And this is, I think, part of the problem that we have as individuals is that, it's all very well placing the blame at the door of companies. And I'm not saying they're not blameless. There are organizations with huge cultural and workplace cultures that encourage overwork. But actually, it's down to each individual to make their own, life choices. Let's look at a couple of companies and what they have done to help the situation. I'm going to come back to personal responsibility. There's records here of LinkedIn that gave all of its nearly 16,000 full-time employees a paid week off in April last year to help them combat burnout, encourage them to unplug and recharge. Now, there's a key word, encourage them to unplug and recharge. LinkedIn can't make their employees do that. That's down to the individuals. I don't know about you, but, there is this piece about, when I was off work, I'm a lot better now than I used to be. I should say, I'm not saying I'm perfect with this burnout thing, by the way. I'm just sharing my experiences and my knowledge. But I used to check my emails all the time, and I used to really struggle to unplug. Now, from a mindset point of view, what I'm really interested in is what drove that behavior. As you're going to come to find out later in the episode, I think behavior, choices, and beliefs have a massive part to play in mine and potentially a lot of other people's burnout. Because my behavior was, I need to check my emails. Now, had anybody ever told me I should check my emails when I was off? No. Did I feel a sense that I needed to? Yes. That's about me. That's about the choices that I make. And I'm going to come back to that a bit later. SAP here, there's a record here of SAP doing some stuff, Cisco doing stuff, Google, Thomson Reuters. Many of them have done stuff. Let's take Thomson Reuters, for example, as an institution. They've got company-wide mental health days. I remember watching a video by, Simon Sinek, and he was saying in his organization, rather than people making up a stomach bug type illness when their mental health is not good, actually, it's okay in his organization for you to say, I'm taking a mental health day. I need to step back. And I think company cultures have come a long, long way. And like I said, I'm not saying that they're blameless, but, could my employer have stopped me working? I mean, short of standing next to me and shutting my laptop and confiscating it and taking my phone away, what else could they do? Now, that comment is rather ironic because if my ex-husband ever hears this, there was many times in the lead up to my burnout that he actually did that. And I remember being so angry and frustrated at the time, like, how dare he take my laptop and my mobile phone away? I felt like my left hand had been cut off. I was desperate, like, give it back to me. I need to know what's going on. So there were people in my life trying to warn me, but I didn't listen. I didn't see it. And I'd got myself into a behavioural pattern that, that really, wasn't helpful for me and my mental health. Now, I know this podcast is probably not going to be the kind of podcast that you were expecting to hear about burnout, but really, I really come from this as a place of personal responsibility. No one else, I can point the finger at. We have this thing in NLP about the cause-effect equation. And if you've heard many of my podcast episodes, you'll have heard me talk about it all before. It's all very well for me to sit here and point the finger at my employer and say it was their fault. I'm not saying they were blameless. In fact, I don't think they were blameless. And I do think workplace stress was a significant contributing factor. I mean, it does make me raise an eyebrow that at one point there was 3 of us covering the whole of the UK in this organisation. And 12 months later, there was then 5 of them. So we were being asked to deliver a huge amount. And so on one hand, they were like, you need to deliver all this work. And on the other hand, oh yeah, but we care about you, and I think they did the best they could at the time. Another NLP presupposition, people do the best with the resources they have available. And I think my boss absolutely did that. I wouldn't have said that at the time, though, I'll be honest, because I was very angry about what had happened to me. But actually, I was responsible. So coming back to the cause-effect equation, we have people at the effect side of life blaming everything and everyone else for what goes on in their life. And people at cause, people that want to take responsibility. Now, I can't control the environment necessarily that I was working in. Like, the expectations were the expectations. But I have to stop to think about, what can I do? What could I do? What are the options? And you know what? That environment wasn't right for me. And I ended up leaving it. Like they say, isn't it? The old saying that, the environment that made you sick is not an environment that will help you get well, or words to that effect. I probably completely ruined someone's quote, but it's certainly not mine. But I think it's true. I think you have choices. Coming back to my point earlier, I think a lot of this comes down to behavior, choice, and belief. And you're going to hear me talk a lot about that today. But I had choices. I didn't feel like it at the time. And had I had a coach, had I had someone to help me, I think I would have seen those choices a lot earlier. Now, you're going to love this episode because I've got another stat for you, and then I'm going to talk more. But there's now a fascinating survey that I found, just looking at my notes again, because I want to get this right for you. A survey that Deloitte did of 1,000 people in the US. Now, it's interesting because the Deloitte are advocating employees should consider workplace culture, not just wellbeing programs. And again, you're going to hear me talk about this because, everybody's, you should be in yoga, you should be exercising, you should do all of those things. And don't get me wrong, they are all good for your health and you absolutely should do them if that is something that works for you. But it's not just about sticky plasters. It's not just about all of that. Again, I keep coming back. It comes back to behavior, choices, and beliefs. And yes, companies have to do more, but it's not all just about their wellbeing programs. Anyway, if you're not a company that doesn't have a wellbeing program, you really should think about it. I used to run multiple wellbeing programs in different companies I worked in back in my HR days, and they really do make a difference, but it's not going to fix it for every individual. Now, this survey, coming back to Deloitte, I hope you're keeping pace with me and I hope you're enjoying this episode. Now, this survey it's fascinating, right? So it says here that passion may not prevent workplace stress. So if you've read up much about burnout, you'll find a lot of people talking about how finding your purpose and being on purpose and doing meaningful work and all of those things, has a contributing factor to whether people burn out or not. If you do something that you love, if you feel like you're making a contribution, you're probably going to have more energy to do more and achieve more because you're on purpose. And I get that to a point. But it's not the whole story. Now, it says here, 87% of professionals surveyed say they have passion for their current job. Great, brilliant. Because if you're not doing something that you love, then change it, But anyway, 87% love it, brilliant. But 64% say they're frequently stressed, dispelling the myth that passionate employees are immune to stress and burnout. Oh, yes, did I raise a glass to that when I saw that. So I think it's interesting. Now, let me talk to you a little bit more about my journey and why I'm so passionate about helping people get their head around burnout. Now, you see, the thing is, I was in HR for 14 years and I was hugely passionate about what I did. All right, I fell out of love with it in the end, but for 14, nearly 15 years, I loved it. I loved making a difference. I was hugely passionate about the difference that we would make as a team, that we could, drive profit into businesses. We could improve employee well-being, engagement, look after people, develop people, help them develop their career. Like, there was so much I loved about that profession. But I think that was part of my undoing. You see, the problem is I woke up one day and I just couldn't do it anymore. Now, I had burnt out. I'd absolutely burnt out. Now, I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression. And if you've not heard my story about anxiety and depression, then go back and find the podcast episode all about my story because I share it. But I worked hard. Like, I worked harder than anybody else I know. And I was relentless in my pursuit of perfectionism. And again, if you know much about me, you'll know my story of perfectionism. Now I have a belief, and it's just my belief, that perfectionism is the flip side of people that have a massive fear of failure. And I used to have that. I wasn't diagnosed with dyslexia, but I've always struggled with spelling and language. I've always had foggy head. I forget things, and we all know these little quirks about ourselves, right? And we have to, compensate for them. Well, that's what it feels like we have to do. And so I'd work harder and I'd do longer. I knew it would take me 4 or 5 times longer for me to read a board report than any other director that had to read it. I would have to get my highlighters out. I developed strategies to really help me mitigate this fear of failure. And that was part of burnout. That was the third part of my jigsaw puzzle, which is the beliefs. I believed I would fail if I didn't work hard. Now, Simon Sinek, I was watching a YouTube video, again, as part of my research for this episode. I really enjoyed researching this episode, actually. I'm sure you're probably getting that. Now, Simon Sinek, in one of the videos I found about him, a massive Simon Sinek fan. If you don't know about him, go find him. Now, he gave a story of a lumberjack. And I'm probably not going to get this exactly right, but kind of bear with the essence of the story. And essentially what happened was there was a story of 2 lumberjacks. Both started at the same time every single day and both finished at the same time every day, and both were cutting wood. Now, one of the lumberjacks disappeared for an hour in the middle of the day, and the other lumberjack never knew where he went. And the other lumberjack said to him one day, "We start at the same time, we finish at the same time. You disappear for an hour during the middle of the day, but yet you always cut more wood than me?" And he said, "Well, yes." He said, "Where do you think I go? I go home to sharpen my saw." Now, that's like, when I was in burnout, that would have made no sense to me whatsoever, right? Because I was just like, no, I need to work hard and work harder. But actually, sometimes there's better ways, there's more efficient ways of doing things, and we need to take time out in order to see the bigger picture. Sometimes when we're at risk of burnout, we've got our head buried so deep in what we're doing that we don't look up to see other options, smarter options, more efficient ways of doing things. We just find a way of doing it and go, well, I might as well do that. Some of you, like me, will remember the old office humour books that we used to have back when I started my working career. And I always remember one that had a sign on it that was called Stress Reduction Tool. It said at the top with a big circle on it, and it said bang head here. And we used to have it on the office wall. Now, clearly, right, if you bang your head against the wall on that piece of paper, right, because it says you're supposed to do it to reduce your stress levels, and it doesn't work, do you keep banging your head? No, you don't, because you go, oh my God, that hurts, or, oh, my head's bleeding. I need to stop. I need to do something different. But when you're in burnout, you don't think like that. You just think, I've just got to work harder and harder and harder and harder, as I go. It's really interesting. And I really have started to form the view that, yes, there are environmental factors. Yes, there are workplace cultural factors. And all of those things need to be addressed. But becoming burnt out is equally about personal responsibility for me. It is about each individual's behaviours, choices, and beliefs. Talented people are way more, I think, at risk. Now, we all have a talent at something. Einstein, I think it was the Einstein quote, if you try and get a fish to climb a tree, it's not going to work. Take a monkey and it'll work. Something like that. Anyway, you probably know the quote. But people that are talented and have a real passion and skill at doing things, I think are more at risk. I mean, here's the thing, right? When you start doing a job, take a senior manager in an organization, there comes a point where they have to master the skill to be able to do the job and get the level of competency they need. But for many managers in organizations, this goes beyond simple competency to do a job. It almost transcends to a higher level, that potentially of identity. Now, some of you will be familiar with Robert Dilts' work in NLP around the levels. And, identity, when people start to have problems that link in with that, then that's a bigger challenge for us. When someone say, I'm a high performer, I am a manager, I'm a leader, I'm an accountant, like you label yourself with your job. Your job and you are two separate things. But in burnout, I never saw it like that. It was all the same. Now, we lead ourselves in life in NLP and what we call the first position. Now, if you have ever done any NLP training, you might have come across the technique called perceptual positions, sometimes known as the 3-chair technique for the students that I've trained. And position 1 is you, and position 2 is usually someone else, and position 3 is usually an objective observer. But essentially, let's not get caught up in that technique, but the positions that we go through in life are quite important. So position 1 is me, right? This is me looking through my own eyes, experiencing life as me. And most of you will be familiar with that because that's how we live our lives, right? But we often will lose the objectivity. We'll often lose that ability to take a step back and actually look at what's going on for us. Metaphorically stepping back and seeing myself sat here in this room in the office recording this episode for you. It's a very different, slightly more detached view of me and my life at this moment in time. Now, the absence of our ability to step back is part of, I think, the unconscious problem that might lead to burnout. It's almost like we're wandering through life like in some kind of trance, if you like, just going from one thing to the next, just going through the motions. Lots of parents talked about that during the pandemic, trying to homeschool children. It was just get up, set them up, try and get some work to try and get things. It was just day after day. It was relentless. But what if more of us during that pandemic, and I include myself, as many of you know, I don't have kids, but if I consider myself during that kind of crisis phase of the pandemic right back at the beginning, if I'd taken a step back, actually I would have gained more perspective. I would have been able to think more clearly. I would have been able to think perhaps a little bit more objectively about my situation. And, rather than metaphorically banging my head against that wall as I was just talking about, I could step back and go, hang on, this is not working. What am I going to do differently? Like the lumberjack that Simon Sinek talks about, is there a different way of actually achieving more with less effort in less time? Now, we therefore, I think, need to become more conscious, more aware, more self-aware about what's going on in our lives. And I'll be honest with you, it was a light bulb moment for me. If I compare how I run my life now to how I ran my life back before I got burnt out, I am much more self-aware. Now, if you're someone that knows me personally, you've been trained by me, or you follow me on social media, I'm a busy woman, like my life is very busy. But what people don't see, because it's social media and it's, you don't tell your customers everything, do you? But what people don't see is actually how I manage my energy levels behind the scenes. People always say to me, Laura, how do you do it? People will see me train for 11 days straight, sometimes 14 days straight, because I'm running courses back to backs with different groups of students. And if I had £1 for every time someone had said to me, Laura, how do you do it? I'd be a rich woman. Now, part of it is the passion, is the drive, is the sense of joy, the sense of achievement, the sense of fulfillment that I get at doing a job I love. But there have to be boundaries around it. I'll be honest with you. The prep for this podcast episode, I did yesterday. I started work on it mid-afternoon and I got so engrossed. I was what some people would call in flow. I was so engrossed and so fascinated by finding out about all these stats I found for you to tell you about. And then started to think about my own personal journey and what did I want to tell you about that. That before I knew it, it was 8 o'clock and I hadn't had my dinner. That was time to stop. Now, old Laura would have gone, no, let's do it. Let's stay up. Let's record the episode. Let's get it done because I'm passionate and I'm excited and I'm on the treadmill and I love what I do. But now I check in with myself. I sit there and I think to myself, now, am I going to do my best work tonight? Or should I break and should I get up in the morning and doing it? And I'm now recording this episode for you the following morning, surrounded by all my notes from yesterday. I wouldn't have done that before. I will often, if I get stressed in a particular part of the day when I'm working from home, I know the strategies that work for me. I'll go to bed for an hour in the mid-afternoon. My old housemate used to take the mick out of me and my nana naps. But that's a strategy that works for me because it powers down my mind. And I'm going to explain the science behind how that works in just a few moments. But I think it's fascinating to start to think about what personal responsibility, what behaviour do we need to change, what choices are we making, and what beliefs are playing a role in terms of how we are the way we are and how we expose ourselves, predispose ourselves even to burning out or becoming burned out. I think it's fascinating. Now, I'd like you to do a little exercise. Now, only do this if it is safe to do so. This is the exercise that's on the second page in the ebook if you've downloaded it. And if not, you can come back later. I've pretty much written out a rough exercise so you can do this exercise I'm about to get you to do at any time you like. Now, the exercise is going to require you to close your eyes and to do essentially what we call a body scan. Now, it's really interesting in NLP when we start to look at kinesthetic feelings and where they are in our body and what that might mean for us, becoming this more self-aware person that I keep talking about. Now, this is a technique you can do at any time of day, as regularly as you like. In fact, I'd encourage you to get into the habit of doing it maybe once a week or more or less, whatever works for you, and track yourself over time. I've actually put a tracker here in the ebook for you so you can record your scores. Now, if you're not safe to do this, please skip forward the podcast and carry on listening if you're driving or doing something else. But if it's right for you to follow along right now, then please do that, only as long as it's safe to do so. If you're driving, operate machinery and stuff, don't do this now. But yeah, so first of all, you need to go and find yourself somewhere quiet to sit or lie down, which might mean you need to pause this episode just for a second while you sort yourself out. I like doing it sat in my great big armchair in my lounge with my feet up on my recliner chair. And, but you can do it lying on your bed wherever you like. So just take a moment to organise that, pause the episode, and then you can come back when you're ready. I hope you found somewhere that is safe and where you won't be disturbed. This is only going to take a few minutes. It's not going to take long at all. And I'd like you, if you would, as long as it's safe, to just close your eyes and just take a few deep breaths. I like to do it in through my nose and out through my mouth. And just as you breathe out, just let any tension in your body start to disappear and let those shoulders start to drop. And just take a few slow, deep breaths. Some people like to count in for 4 and try and count out for somewhere between 8 and 12, whatever works for you. But I'm telling you from my experience that a longer out breath will really start to help you just reconnect with your body and just start yourself feeling as if you're drifting off a little bit to that place of peace and rest. You're safe and you're at ease as you just breathe deeply. Now, when you feel you're ready, we're going to start to scan the body, just breathing easily and effortlessly with your eyes closed, body fully supported. Now, let's start at the top of your head and just notice any sensations around your scalp and your head. As you start to bring your attention down, maybe to your forehead, notice your eyebrows and that space between your eyebrows where some of us sometimes hold our stress, maybe the temples of your face and down into your cheeks and your jaw. Like, how is your jaw? Is it tense? Are you relaxing it? And I wonder if you focused on just relaxing it as you breathe out, whether that would just help you just rest a little more. How's your neck? Any tension there? Can you feel anything? As you continue now, breathing easily and effortlessly. Carry on down and put your attention onto your left and your right shoulder. What do you notice as you start to maybe think about that space on your back between your shoulder blades and down your back? How's that all doing? Perhaps you've noticed a sensation somewhere in your body, maybe, I don't know, back when you were doing your mouth. It could be anywhere. And as you're doing this body scan, just start to ask yourself, how are your energy levels? Your vitality, how are they? Like, if you were to rate them 0 to 10, where would you put them? What about that feeling of fatigue? Are you tired? Could you do with taking some action to reduce that level of fatigue? Just pay attention to your body as you scan through the body, asking yourself, how you doing? And how are those levels, those energy levels, those stress levels? Are these appearing anywhere in your body as you're going? I sometimes feel it in the crook of my neck and in my shoulders, and I'm moving them as I'm talking to you now. Like, that's somewhere where it goes. I often feel it in my jaw. Never expected that, but that's sometimes where I feel it. So where do you feel it? Let's continue with our body scan, thinking about our shoulders down into our upper arms, elbows, forearms, wrists, hands, fingers and thumbs. And just as you put your attention on them, continue to breathe easily and effortlessly. By now, you probably should be feeling your breathing starting to slow as your body starts to rest just for a few minutes. And as you continue, take your attention to your chest, your ribs, your abdomen, your torso. Like, how is all of this? Energy, tension, fatigue, how is it? What about your hips? What about your back, upper, lower, mid back? Like, how is all of that? I have a therapist that I've just started working with, and we've identified that I carry a lot of tension in my lower back and in my hips. I have a very stiff left hip. But how do I make that better? These are the types of things I want you to start to think about. Noticing any emotional stuff as it displays in the body, wherever, just noticing it. Notice the sensation and just let it go. Following down your legs through your thighs, knees, shins, calves, down to your ankles. Just feel the feet as they're on the floor or as you're on the bed. If you're on the bed, just notice that feeling of your body fully supported by what you're lying on. And if you're sat, notice the ground underneath your feet. Give your little toes a little wiggle. And ask yourself, now you've scanned your body, think about it in relation to burnout, overwhelm and tiredness. Some even call it the spinning of just far too many plates. If you were to give yourself one score on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is awful, drained, burnt out, and 10 is great, amazing and on form, what number would you give yourself today, right now, having done this exercise? What number would you give yourself? And just pick a number. Perhaps while you're nicely relaxed, just take the opportunity to take a few more deep breaths. I love a breathing technique called box breathing. So how about we breathe in for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4, breathe out for a count of 4, and hold for a count of 4. Why don't we do that together now? So breathing in, 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4, and out, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. And you can just continue to do that for a few moments, just placing your awareness on your breath as you breathe in and out as you do. This is a moment just for you. And I really hope you've enjoyed this body scan exercise today. And you can come back and listen to this anytime you like. And of course, this exercise is written in the ebook. So once you learn the process, you can do it yourself. And when you're ready, I invite you to bring your awareness back into the room and open your eyes. And if you have the workbook to hand, just write that number, whatever number came into your head. Don't analyze it, judge it, or anything else. Just write that number in that great big green box I've put for you on this second page of your workbook. Now, I really hope you enjoyed that exercise. And this is an exercise you can do anytime to check in with your body, to check in, how are you doing? And, how are things going for you, and track it as you go. Now, rest is a really important thing, and I'm going to pick the pace up a little bit because I'm conscious that I could do hours and hours on this podcast. I've just come back from a holiday. Another reason why I have more balance in my life now than I ever used to. And I went away and I didn't take my laptop. And that would never have happened with the old Laura. But I started reading a book called Daring to Rest by Karen Brody. Now, I'm not going to confess I haven't finished reading it. I'm about just over almost halfway through, and I have to say I'm really enjoying it. So, it's Reclaim Your Power with Yoga Nidra, rest, meditation designed for women, but no reason why men can't do it too. And it's fascinating. Now, I want to read you some bits out of her book because I think she talks a lot of sense when it comes to the things that lead up to burnout. Now, she quotes in her book here on page 3, Rubin Naiman, who is a sleep specialist. And he talks actually about the Buddhist philosophy, which teaches that depression, it says here, results from excessive activation that is not properly balanced by rest. Now, I think we have to reevaluate our Western world's understanding of what rest is, because when we think about self-care activities and rest, they're not really rest. You going for a bike ride, you reading a book, taking a trip, they're active. Your body needs balance of rest, according to this sleep expert. And, active stuff is really not going to do, playing a game on your iPhone, that might help you distract yourself from life and from work, but it's still active. It's not rest. Rest is Karen describes here in this book, is this nothingness. And we're not very good with nothingness. She talks in her book about the fact that rest is to surrender from activity and being active, and, surrendering from this need and this will to achieve something, which I think is quite interesting. Now, she goes on in the book to talk about the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, easy for me to say. And I find this all fascinating. And I'll be honest, I'm at the very early stages of my knowledge and learning about all of this. So I'm very much relying on what she's written here in the book, but it fits with what I've read elsewhere. And she talks about the fact that actually doing active things like exercising, taking trips with friends, going to dinner, these activities being stimulated actually stimulates the sympathetic nervous system. Now, this part of your system does all sorts of things, including your fight or flight response. So it's a very active part of you. And if you are stimulated for long periods of time with whatever activity, then your body is not going to rest. She talks about actually what's useful is stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system to have more balance. And this is something I never used to do, you see, because back when I had burnout, I'd either be working busy, I'd be out walking, exercising with the dog, or I'd be out socializing with people. I never actually truly rested aside from when I slept. And actually, I'm getting much better at it. Now, this is a book all about something called Yoga Nidra. Again, I'm at the very early stages of my learning with that. Recently done what we call an iRest course with Louise Herzog, one of our students in our NLP community. Go and check her out if you're interested in this stuff. And I find it hugely fascinating that actual rest as well as sleep is important, and we need to activate this parasympathetic nervous system for balance, this non-active time. And it's this non-active time that allows the body and the mind to rejuvenate. So true rest is not self-care as we would perhaps know it. And I'm not saying that those things are not good for your mental health. Of course they are. Being with people that are positive, being with people that lift you up, doing activity, all of those things. Of course, they're all really, really good. They're not rest. Rest, she talks about, is this space of wonder. I love just watching the sunset, right? I live about 12 minutes from the beach. And sometimes I'll just drive out around sunset and I'll just sit in the car and I'll just watch that sun as it slowly starts to go down and look at the wonderful colours. That's almost like a state of nothingness, that space of wonder that is really important. And this idea then that Yoga Nidra, this at-rest process from yoga, is quite interesting. I mean, she talks also in this book about, our natural cycle. Now, this is written about in many, many places. They reckon that our pattern of our body operates in 90-minute cycles. And, it's interesting because if your body is naturally programmed for 90-minute cycles, Nathaniel Kleitman, I think, was the guy that first came up with this idea, although it could have been someone else. Like I say, I'm a beginner at this. But he observed that this 90-minute cycle when we're both asleep and awake. And actually, what a lot of us try and do is override this 90-minute cycle, which I think is hugely fascinating. This is a book all about women, but like I say, the stuff applies to men too. But it's interesting because when we try to override the natural 90-minute cycle that we go through, actually, that's when we reach for things like caffeine and sugar to fuel ourselves, to sustain that alert, stimulated state for longer. Now, later on in the book, again, I've so enjoyed reading this this book. Like I said, I'm only almost halfway through. It's a great little book. Now, she talks about the benefits to the brain of Yoga Nidra and essentially also rest and sleep. Now, you may or may not know, we talk about this on our NLP courses about the different brain waves that we have. So you will have, typically speaking, you'll go from beta brain waves, then through to alpha, theta, then delta. They're the kind of 4 stages as your body starts to slow down. And it's really interesting because here in the book, page 15, if you've got it, she talks about that when your body starts to slow. So beta would be you normal and awake. Alpha is when you're slightly more relaxed, shifting into this downshift, as she describes it, the powering down, if you like, into rest states. And when you come into this alpha, it starts to slow. And in theta, so this is the third category down, if you like, your thoughts slow to 4 to 8 thoughts per second, according to this book. And theta is not sleep as such. Now, when we do hypnosis with people, we always intend to get people into this theta brainwave, which makes total sense now in terms of why people find hypnosis so beneficial, not just because of the hypnosis itself and the positive suggestions that we would put in, but actually the person is having 30, 60, 90 minutes of rest, if you like, which also is hugely helpful. I mean, she talks in this book about how theta is great for a learning state, and oh my goodness, don't I agree? Serotonin is released. This is our mood regulating hormone when you're in theta. And then obviously when you go into delta, your thoughts will slow down even further to 1 to 3.9 thoughts per second, according to this book. So when you really start to think about what rest really is, I think as a society, we're pretty poor at rest. And actually things like meditation, yoga nidra, eye rest, hypnosis, mindfulness, like all of these things have probably even more health benefit than we might even realize when it comes to burnout. Just absolutely eye-opening as I was really starting to consider this yesterday. Now, what I'd also like to do, I'm conscious this is going to be a long episode, but I really hope you're enjoying this and getting tons from it, alongside this, the ebook that I've created to help you. Now, in terms of burnout, we therefore need to start to think about balance then, right? Because if actually work is causing a lot of problems for a lot of us, a lack of boundaries and therefore a lack of rest, and a lack of perhaps other things in our life, this is how I think we can better I kind of almost vaccinate ourselves, not really, against burnout. Like, what's a better word than vaccine? You know what I mean? Like inoculate ourselves, like prevent this from happening. Now, in the ebook, on the next page, I've put a wheel of life for you. Now, some of you will be familiar with the wheel of life. And this is essentially where you rate each area of your life on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 5. Now, I've done a 1 to 5 in the ebook, but you can have 1 to 10. It doesn't matter. And you don't have to do a circle either, like you could do it on a piece of paper if you wanted to. But really starting to think about and honestly think about, where are you in relation to these categories in your life? Now, on the wheel of life here, I've chosen, health, friends, hobbies, recreational, spirituality, careers, finances. But of course, you could pick any label that you like. Perhaps for you, mental health and physical health are both important and need their own quadrants. Perhaps personal development is important to you. Maybe time off is important to you. Maybe fun, you need a category for fun on this wheel because that's important to you. Maybe you want to split significant others and friends and family separately. I mean, there's no limit to how many quadrants you can have. I caution you to have hundreds. Don't have hundreds rather. But like, what are the areas of your life that are important to you, and how would you rate yourself honestly in relation to those areas? Significant other. Now, you may have a relationship with a significant other, or you might be single on your own. And how content are you with that? There is no judgment here around any of these priorities for your life, but you should at least stop and rate them. How do you see yourself in each of these areas? I'll be honest, and I'm not perfect at managing burnout. Sometimes I slip up, and I've had a very busy 3 months prior to August when I'm recording this. And I was very, very close to burnout. There was a lot of stress in my life. I had a lot of issues with the venue we were using for training. Thankfully, that's gone now. And, and trying to trade the business in a pandemic and all that kind of stuff, like very stressful. I needed time off. And so I had 10 days off and I went away. And those 10 days away from my normal life enabled me to just stop and reflect. I mean, I read a book. I don't ever read a book. I read a book about rest. I reconnected with my family. I did things I loved. I mean, I went bodyboarding. I haven't been bodyboarding in the sea for probably 4 or 5 years. And I went with my family. We had a day at the beach and it was amazing. And I reconnected with them. And I started to think about, actually, do you know what? Apart from my wonderful dog, Rosie, who's fast asleep by the side of me, I don't really have any other hobbies in my life right now. And actually, that's not good for balance and boundaries. Now, I'm a super busy woman and we could all say we're too busy to do anything, right? Totally. We can all find a plausible reason to kid ourselves that we've got no time. We all have the same 24 hours in every single day. But this comes back to choices and behavior again. How are you choosing to spend your time? I could work 14, 16 hours a day if I wanted to. I will never get to the bottom of my to-do list for this business and for my work, but I have to stop. I have to make time. I'll make time for my customers. I'll make time for my business. I'll make time for the team that work for me because it's important. I spent 4 hours the other afternoon with one of my team looking at Google AdWords, and I'll do that. So why don't I prioritize myself? Why don't I make time and protect time in my diary for me? And hot off the press, as of 2 days ago, I bought myself a sewing machine and I've signed up for some sewing machine classes because I love creating things. I'd love to be able to say I've made my own clothes and taken up my own curtains and all of those things. And actually, I could easily say I haven't got time for that. But you know what? I've paid the money, put the workshops in my diary. I bought the machine. It's coming tomorrow. And I'm going to make the time to do it because actually I think it's good for my balance in my life. Now, that's not rest, but that's doing other things. So when we talk about how important behavior and choices are in relation to better managing burnout, for me, we need to become more consciously aware of where we're saying no. Now, a lot of people have a problem with saying no to other people, saying no to things, saying no to work. I mean, I know I used to be like that. But the problem is we all have the same 24 hours, as I said. So if you want to free up time to have more balance in your life, to free up more time to do other things, free up time to actually rest, that by default means that you have to say no to other things. People go, oh, no, I couldn't say no to other people or whatever, and I couldn't say no to work. But the truth is, you're already saying no. At the moment, if you prioritize work over your mental health, you're saying no to your mental health. Now, we would never consciously do that, would we? That would be crazy. But that is what we're doing. And so actually, for me, part of the solution for me when I was starting to recover from my burnout was actually becoming more consciously aware about where it was better for me to say no. Now, you will only know for yourself where and when you can do that. But I think, again, going back to this whole thing about, not falling asleep behind the wheel of the car in your own life, is actually, if you can get better at saying no in order to free up your time to spend on your plan to come out of burnout, your plan to better manage your mental health, your plan to bring a variety back into your life and all of those things, like that's only going to be a good thing, right? Just as a side note before we move on, if you're someone that struggles to say no to other people and other things, then check the description below this podcast and I will put a link to the YouTube video and the free ebook that I created called Saying No Without Feeling Guilty. Because if that's going to help you, I want you to access it. Talking about hobbies, because I think this is a big part of how we perhaps have more balance in our life. I put a post on LinkedIn. I did a poll. And at the recording of this episode, it's had almost 15,000 views, 300 votes, and loads and hundreds of comments. And I just said to people, do you have a hobby? Yes. No. Thinking about it? Absolutely. And 63% of people said, yes, they have a hobby. And 17% of people said, absolutely, I have several. 15% of people said no. And 5% said thinking about it. Now, hobbies are a great way. And now if I read through some of these comments that people have left me, I was in awe at the variety of hobbies that all these people have, from making slate caves for tropical fish, playing recreational hockey, roller skating, painting, riding, knitting, silversmithing. There's so many, patchwork, embroidery, walking the dog, doing agility with the dog. Wonderful picture of a lady called Sharon who's put a picture up of her and her horse, which I think is just amazing. Cake decorating, portraits, kickboxing. Helen's the kickboxing. Roger talks about learning Spanish, yoga, gardening, weightlifting. Listen, the list goes on and on and on. And I sat there and thought, you know what? I need a hobby. I need a hobby. And I'm so glad I've just signed up to bring some more balance into my life. And I have to make the time to do that. In your ebook, so once you've done your wheel of life, and there's just a template in here for you, there's then a space on the following page for each of the areas of your life. Again, change the titles if they don't work for you, and just make some notes about your observations about the scores that you've got. And then start to think about, where do you want to make change in your life? Where are you going to bring that balance back? What different choices are you going to make? What different behaviors do you need to have in your life to do that? I just think it's fascinating when we really start to look at, where are we? This step back that I talked about earlier. Like, consider looking at yourself like a scientist would, right? So imagine there's a scientist in the room where you are right now, looking at you, analysing your life and doing this self-analysis that I'm encouraging you to do. And what would they say? Objectively. Now, I can't make you change. I can't make you do things differently. No one could for me. I had to discover it and learn it for myself. But the fact you're listening to this podcast episode tells me that you either want to help yourself or you want to help someone else. You wouldn't still be here listening to me talk about this if it wasn't something that was important to you, for sure, and it's really interesting. Carl Jung, a Swiss psychiatrist many years ago, talked about what you resist persists. And the more that you resist bringing this balance back into your life, the more you resist saying, I don't have time, the more that you don't take the action, the more you're going to continue to make yourself susceptible to burnout, And like I say, I keep saying I'm not perfect. I'm not saying I've got this nailed myself. I'm sat here drinking hot water and lemon. I've got my salt candle going and the dog's asleep. But, there's a lot of, if you can argue, self-care going on right now. But I'm not resting. I'm not bringing balance to my life. I'm just doing little things. And all of those things have a role to play, and I'm not dissing them at all. All of those hobbies, the things that people I've read out that are doing, absolutely brilliant. But none of it will work unless you start to look at your behaviors, your choices, and your belief. None of it. I think it's quite interesting. Now, in your ebook here, I've done a little quadrant about where are you now in relation to burnout. And this is the last kind of reflective piece before we start taking some action. And I've asked you 4 questions, and I'd like you to get the ebook, and I'd like you to really think about these 4 questions. What won't happen if I change things? What will happen if I change things? What will happen if I don't change things? And what won't happen if I don't change things? Because these 4 questions, and really reflecting on these questions, this isn't just a 2-second fill a box in, right? This is a real reflection piece. You've got to decide, like, how valuable is this change to you? Like, do you want to carry on the way that you are? Or actually, are you prepared to take the action? Are you prepared to do what needs to be done to get the change that you want to have in your life? I mean, only you can make that change. There's all sorts of, we talk in NLP about sub-modalities, and I'm not going to talk hugely about that because I'm really conscious that I'm already like massively overrunning. But when you think about how your life is right now, like, is that images for you that are big and bright in your mind, large, or are they far away? Are they small? How do you feel about them? Are they things that are diminishing? When you look at that wheel of life and you think, oh yeah, career, yeah, brilliant. That to me, that's big, that's bright in my head. Like, that's amazing. Yeah, friends. No, you know what? I don't have time. Like, I need to make time, and it's hugely, hugely fascinating when you start to really, reflect and step back from where you are. You see, as I said at the very beginning of this episode, too many people, using the metaphor of a car, too many people fall asleep at the wheel. Like, these signs are usually there if you check in with yourself, if you actually stop and step back and look, the signs are normally there, but we live our life in first position, as I said earlier. And that means that we don't stop to reflect. We don't stop to analyze. We don't stop to take stock. We don't stop to think about, could I do things in a better way that takes less time, more efficient, using the Simon Sinek example. And I think the more we can become self-aware, the better. But it's down to you to take personal responsibility if you're going to make any changes in your life to prevent yourself being susceptible to burnout. Like, what different choices do you need to make in your life? What different behaviors do you need to start to demonstrate? What different beliefs do you have? I mean, I was very honest and told you about my fear of failure that I used to have. I don't anymore because of all the NLP training I've done and the change work. I've told you, having a coach back then would have helped me, I think, discover what was going on for me and probably could have prevented my burnout. I can't say for sure because you can't rewind the clock. The truth is that there are so many things that you could do to either prevent or improve your situation in relation to burning out. The challenge is, what are you going to do? If you're someone that repeatedly gets burned out time after time, then you're going to have to change something. Maybe it's the environment that you're in that needs changing. Maybe your relationships are not supporting you. Maybe you need to spend more time with positive people. Maybe boundaries are what you need to work on. Maybe you've lost that balance in your life and you need to think about your hobbies and how you spend your time. Maybe rest is something for you that you actively need to go and investigate and find out more about. Your burnout is not going to disappear overnight. It's probably taken you quite some time to get to the point you're at now. I know it took me a long time because I miss all the signs because I'm on the road because I fell asleep at the wheel, as they say. But, you absolutely, need to think about, where are you at, like, honestly, and what honestly are you prepared to do? If you're not going to take the action, then my question to you is, so what are you gaining by keeping yourself burnt out? Now, that's a tough love question. I'm fully aware of that. But if you're keeping yourself burnt out, then what are you gaining? Because you must be gaining something, because otherwise you change. Some people might continue to keep burnt out because it means other people do stuff for them, because people feel sorry for them, because people run around after them. That's not healthy. You need to take personal responsibility. That's where I'm at with it. Like, take some responsibility, decide what you are going to do to change the course of your life. Now, if you're really serious about getting underneath the skin of your burnout, that what's caused it, and how are you going to prevent yourself from going through these cycles in the future, then you've got to dig deeper into your thoughts and behaviors. Now, if you've listened to the NLP podcast series, you'll know that your unconscious mind controls your behavior, and it runs 10 to 20,000 patterns or programs every single day. And unless we start doing a little bit of what I call a software update in your unconscious mind and have you run some healthier patterns and programs, have you get rid of some of these unconscious limiting beliefs that you have, some of these internal conflicts, and a very common conflict that will lead to a lot of women burning out is part of me wants to be an amazing professional, part of me wants to be an amazing mum. Oh my goodness, can you be perfect at both? I mean, perfection's an illusion, I think, but I didn't used to think that. So there are some beliefs, some thinking patterns, some things you'll be doing that are not helping. Now, the stuff I'm sharing in this podcast today are all what I call conscious mind techniques. And we're not changing anything at the unconscious mind. We're not changing the patterns or programs. And if you're really serious about really getting under the skin, you either need to come on an NLP practitioner course or find yourself an experienced coach to work with. Because if they're working with you with NLP, they will be able to help you really make those changes that you need to make to the unconscious patterns and programs that you're running. Now, we can't do that on a podcast. So what can we do, Laura? Well, let's have a look. First things first, next page in the ebook, my goals. So you need to decide for yourself what your priority areas are going to be. Like what areas of your life is going to give you the biggest impact right now with preventing you from being exposed to the potential risk of burnout. Now, here in your ebook, I've given you an opportunity to write out 3 goals around burnout to help you move forward. Now, I've only put 3 deliberately because those of us that are prone to burnout are people that like to overcommit. We like to say we're going to do too much. So 3 is all I'm going to let you have. I mean, that's up to you. I'm not going to be there to stop you, but I really would caution you having to make yourself too many more commitments. So based on everything that you've done so far on this episode with me today, what are you going to do? What action are you going to take? What are your goals? Why are those things important? And how are you going to measure whether or not you achieve them? Now, this doesn't have to be perfect. This is work in progress, and you could amend, refine, upgrade, revise, remove, replace any of these at any time because it's all of yours. But I really want you to start to think about what action are you going to take? Now, if you turn over the page then in your ebook, you've then got the now reflect. So what won't happen if I take this action? What will happen if I take the action? What won't happen if I don't take the action? And what will happen if I don't take the action? Those of you trained in NLP will know this is Cartesian logic. If you're not, don't worry about it. Just use the book as it is. And then decide what steps you're going to take right now in relation to these 3 goals. So this ebook is there to support you to do that. Now, again, without you coming in and seeing me one-to-one or coming on a course, I can't help you change the unconscious patterns or programs, but consciously we can do a little bit of work to make progress and make steps in this area. The next thing we've got here in the ebook is talking about positive habits. So questions for you to answer. And I'm not going to go through all of these. You need to go and download the ebook and complete these yourself. But your habits, the habitual things that you do are going to play a role in whether or not this is actually going to change for you. So, what do you want? How are you going to do it? What habits do you need? How are you going to pick up new habits that you might need? Now, on the next page in the ebook, I've then put a page all about role models. Now, sometimes the easiest way to solve a problem or achieve a goal is to find someone that's already done it. Now, in NLP, we call this modeling. And again, on a podcast, I can't teach you all about modeling. But what I've done here is put some questions in here for you to think about. Who do you know that's been in a similar situation to yourself, that's overcome these obstacles? And can you find out how they did it? So hopefully you've been taking notes throughout this episode because I could be your role model in terms of some of the ideas I've given you. But there's a whole host of questions here in the book for you to use. There's then in the book, again, another action-orientated task for you to do, a page called Shoulds into Musts. There's no point in having shoulds. Far too many people, as I call it, should all over themselves. It is not the way to motivate yourself. You need to get those shoulds to the musts that I am going to, I will do. And on here, you've got a little exercise that you can use for that. It comes from some of the work of Tony Robbins, who many of you will have heard of, in this sense of creating some urgency around how you're going to do things. He says here, the difference between musts and shoulds in your life you want and the life that you have. So that's really useful. I've then, in addition to that, all these resources for you in the ebook, I've then put in some stuff around mindful choices. Now, I'm not trained in mindfulness, but I have a huge amount of empathy and sympathy. Not sympathy, that's the wrong word. What am I talking about? I believe in it. That's probably what I'm trying to say. And actually, if we can get you more mindful, more aware, self-aware of your choices, which is what I've been talking about, and less on this autopilot falling asleep behind the wheel of the car, then we can be making much more sensible choices. So I put some stuff in here about choices because I've been talking about a lot today. I put a section in here about new habits. So what do you need to change in order to help support you? And then there's a section on limiting beliefs. Now, I shared one of mine with you already. And on a podcast, I can't help you change your limiting beliefs unconsciously. I could if you came on the practitioner course, no problems at all. So there's a page here about that. And then a couple of pages about the belief results cycle. So a little introduction for you about how your beliefs turn into thoughts, which turn into your behaviors, which turn into actions, which turn into results. So your beliefs are something that really are playing a part in the situation you're in relation to burnout. So make sure you go through those pages thoroughly and read everything that I've written in there for that. I've then, nearly there, we've then got a page here for the Wheel of Life vision, as in what do you want to do in terms of improving the areas of the Wheel of Life you did earlier. It's a page for that. And then I've just included a few extra bits and pieces to help you. So there's a success planner, which I think you'll find quite useful for helping you to monitor weekly the success you're making in terms of your burnout plan. There's a journal page. So some of you will really like journaling. A lot of people do it morning and evening every single day. It's a way to become much more self-aware and present and in the moment in relation to this if you really are serious about making a change in your life in this area. So there's a journal template there for you as well. And then at the back, I've put in a habit tracker. So if you've decided that some of the habits, some of the things that you want to do are things like doing, learning about yoga nidra or iRest or journaling or mindfulness or family time or hobbies or whatever, you can then, there's a little monthly tracker on the back here which you can download and use just to tick yourself off. Do you remember when we were all kids, we used to have charts on the fridge? Well, we did in our house, little reward charts. And then you can give yourself a reward for actually making the progress that you want to make in your life in this area. So if you haven't already downloaded the ebook, go and get it, because this ebook is what's going to help you implement everything we've been talking about in this podcast. Burnout is absolutely preventable in my view, and you absolutely can recover from it if you are willing to take the action to change your behaviours or choices and your beliefs. If what you've currently been doing has not been working, then I genuinely hope from me to you that I've given you some ideas and some tools today that you can use to help you on your journey to beating burnout. I would hate for anybody in my community on here, on the podcast or social media or in our students to be suffering with something like this and not have some ideas about the actions which they could take. If you are absolutely serious about making some unconscious changes in your life to help you beat burnout, then you really do need to seriously consider coming on our NLP practitioner course, where I can help you discover the unhelpful thinking, to change it, to look at your limiting beliefs, to absolutely start to change the way that those unconscious patterns and programs are running in your life that are leading you to where you are. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. Can't remember whose quote that was, but it's so, so true. Below this episode, wherever you're listening to this, you will also find a link to our NLP practitioner course page. Go and check it out. You'll also on our website find a guide to helping you picking the right NLP course for you. So I'm conscious that a lot of our listeners are overseas. So some of you in America and all the way around the world. We're in, goodness knows how many countries now. So traveling to the UK to train with me might not be an option, at which point I want you to use that guide to pick the right provider for you. I want you to get good quality, decent NLP training. There is too much rubbish out there. And I don't say that word lightly. And that's quite polite for me. And I want you to get good quality NLP training because I want you to change your life. I want you to beat these things that are holding you back, and I want you to unleash your potential. The name of my NLP business. please let me know what you think about this episode. It's a really good, long, in-depth episode. Look at practical ways to help you with burnout. And I sincerely hope that you have benefited and will benefit. As I said again, go get that ebook if you haven't already got it, because I really know that if you do the work, I know you can start to change the way that you feel, and you can get yourself back to that place of feeling more energized, loving and enjoying life and feeling fulfilled and all of those wonderful things. So stay well. I wish you every success. If you want to talk to us about our NLP courses, then just drop us an email at info@unleashyourpotential.co. No, I can't even remember my own email address. Laura, start again. Sorry, gives you a chance to get a pen, right? info@unleashyourpotential.org.uk. And if you've enjoyed the episode today, drop me an email, let me know. I always love hearing from people when they've had benefit from our stuff. Stay tuned for the next episode in this series, which is the wonderful Yvonne Pritchard, where she is going to be sharing with you the difference NLP has made in her life and in her business. And you'll hear just how passionate she is about helping people, small business owners in their business. And until then, take care, and I'll see you soon.